Hey, g'day people, it's Matt here from Matt Carve. So today we're going to try something a little bit different, and I want you to put in the comments if you think it's a good idea or you enjoyed it or not. So what I am talking about is I carve a lot of different things, and I work as a professional artist, and when I do these things I think about how I'm going to do it. And usually when I make a video for you, I'm thinking about you guys. And I'm thinking, how can I make this easy for you? How can I give you tips to do your carvings? But today I'm going to go through this and I'm going to say what I'm thinking at that time to make these carvings. Because these carvings, even though I kind of make it look easy, I am really thinking a lot to do these things. Because look at that man, I've never carved a man like that. So this video I'm going to show you, well, I'm going to show you my thought pattern. Something like that anyway. Okay, so today I am going to carve a daisy brooch for my mother's birthday. So what I first want to do is I want to start off with a design. So I've got that design on the right, and you can see I've altered the design. So it's got petals in between the other petals. So it's essentially got more petals there. And what I want to do this for is it gives the brooch strength, but it also gives it depth, because those other petals are going to be laid behind it, and if you can make those darker and the front ones lighter, it should stand out more. And the first part of carving is blocking out. So luckily I've got a scroll saw, so I can sort of like speed things up here, and I can just use a scroll saw to go really close to those lines. You could carve this out, or you could use a hand saw as well. But when you're blocking out, you just want to do it the fastest way that's available to you, really. So now I'm going to think about the shape of the flower, or the contour of the front of it. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually extending the petals into the middle part of the flower, because I'm going to carve away those lines. So I've extended those pencil marks, so once I've carved away the lines, I can then redraw the petals back in towards that, and I know where they go. And I can always refer back to the drawing as well. So what I'm looking at here is the depth of it, and so I'm going to put two marks. I'm going to put the mark where the first big petals are, and then the smaller petals that lie behind, I'm going to put a mark there, and that should be where those petals sort of sit. So we're going to curve those back, so the front sort of like goes in at the middle and then round down. Okay, so I'm using a cylinder burr here. I generally, when I carve these smaller carvings, won't use sort of extreme burrs, because you got more chance of it grabbing and getting your finger, just because it's so close to your fingers. So I tend to go for like the coarse or the fine, and because you're carving small areas, it doesn't actually take that long to carve it down. This wood is actually rosewood, and it's probably the equivalent to, I'd say, like walnut or something like that. It's a beautiful wood to carve, and it smells like essential oil, the rosewood oil. Now I'm going back and putting the pencil marks and join up to those inner parts of the petal. It was just sort of like got to think a few steps ahead, because you don't want to really redraw the whole flower. That would become quite complicated. So now I'm going to put in the lines, but you can see here that I'm going to actually only do a small part of the flower. And because I've never really carved a flower like this, well, maybe I've carved one like this, but I can't remember what I was doing. So I'm tending to sort of experiment here, and I'm just trying to figure out what burrs I can carve these petals with. So I'll just do maybe like about 4 or 5 petals, and sort of try and work out a system before I do the whole lot. So I'm finding that sort of mushroom shaped burr quite handy, and the Cutzel taper burr for a little bit more shaping as well. So you can see the problem I have there is I'm just trying to get a real fine line going down. What I'm finding though is the line isn't fine enough. So I'm going to a diamond burr with a really skinny tip just to see what that looks like. And it doesn't look bad, but I'm kind of thinking you got to make it look a little bit organic. So see those lines there? I'm not really keen on that. So I'm going to like shape the petals so one looks like it's kind of going under the other petal. And this will give it sort of like a more of an organic kind of look to it. So I'm using the top of that mushroom burr just to like take it back, and I'll use the side of it to sort of like go under the next petal as well. Gone really close up here. It looks a bit grim. Carvings always go through that really horrible looking stage, and you just got to get past it, I think. So I'm showing you here, I am shaping that petal there, and I'm going to use the side of the burr to sort of like go under the next petal. Okay, so here is a comparison. So we've got those lines there, which I don't think look very good, whereas the under and over kind of thing I think looks more natural. And if you're enjoying the video, hit that like button and leave me a comment if you want. That would be really cool. And I'm going in here with the fine taper burr, and I'm just rounding off that middle part. I'm not sure what that's called actually, but I do rate that taper burr. It's got to be my favorite Cutzel burr. So it's sort of at about this stage where I'm thinking it's kind of almost finished. It's sort of just tidying up and putting in the real fine details. So I'm using that diamond burr there. That's really good for getting in little areas. And I'm also using this one, which is a little bit, I guess, bigger. So it's a bit really nice for kind of rounding off kind of areas. And I'm using here the Dremel 9909. It's a real kind of pointed cutter burr, really good for putting in those lines. And you can see here, if you alter the angle, it'll change the width of the line, and it gives a real kind of beautiful sort of flowing line. So you can sort of put those on the petals, and you sort of want to keep things a little bit flowing, so don't go like in a really straight line. Sort of give it a little bit of flair, I guess you would say. So I'm using one of those wire wheels from Dremel, and I just got this in the pack when you get your Dremel. I didn't buy this. I probably wouldn't buy it. I'm not really too fussed on them. They are actually a little bit dangerous. The wires actually fly off them. So I tend to wear goggles, not glasses, if I'm using this, because the goggles fit firm to your face, and so the wire, when they come off, won't go into your eye. So, but generally I wouldn't recommend using these, but they are good for polishing harder woods. I'm just colouring the brooch now. I'm using a red wood dye, which is different from a stain. A dye will penetrate into the wood, whereas a stain will kind of sit on top of the wood. And a lot of the wood dyes are really nice colours, like this red. Wood dyes are really good for woods that have a really strong grain as well, because it penetrates into the wood and doesn't cover up the grain like a stain would. And here's a few little tips for if you're going to make a brooch. What I do is I sand back wherever the dye has gone onto the back, because what will happen is it can go onto clothing, so get rid of that. And also your brooch pin, you want to rough that up with a little bit of sandpaper so the glue will stick to it. See the holes there? That's so the glue will go through and sort of like settle on the other side as well a little bit, so it will hold it onto the wood even stronger. And for small jobs like this, I always use this epoxy glue. It's sort of 2 parts. It comes in this kind of syringe, and I always mix my glue up on just a little bit of tape because it's cheap and it's easy to get rid of after you finish with it. You can sort of like roll it up and throw it in the bin. I also use, what do I use? I use kebab sticks to mix it with because they're really cheap. Okay, so when you put on the brooch or the pin or whatever you want to call it, put it towards the top of the brooch, because then the brooch will sit better and doesn't have such a angle if it is in the middle.